Hey, this is Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite 8 games that I played at Geekway to the West 2022. Geekway to the West is a convention here in St. Louis where you just come for a couple days and play a lot of games with a bunch of different people. At least that's my experience. I like to find a bunch of different people and play games that are new to me for the first time. And this year I played only 8 new games that were new to me. I think only 8 new games total. In the past I've played more games, but I played some longer games this year, and I think that contributed to it. So a few other mentions here that I'll throw in there before I get to my list, in which I will roughly rank the games that I played in terms of how much I enjoy these experiences. And I'll mention a few things that I enjoyed about the games that I played. So there are a few other Stonemaier Games folks there, people who work for Stonemaier Games. There's Alex. He said he enjoyed Anno 1800 the most. I had previously played that. I have a video about that. Susannah had some epic games of Siege of Runedar. I think she played it 3 times and beat it on the 3rd time. It's a cooperative game. And Joe really had fun with Azul Queen's Garden and Caper. I have played Caper, but not Azul Queen's Garden. I have not played Siege of Runedar. Also, I wanted to mention some games that I really loved from previous Geekways, games that I played for the first time at previous Geekways to the West, because I think this was my 9th Geekway. And a few of those games, those memorable games, were Orleans, Role Player, Dice Forge, Abyss, Azul Summer Pavilion, Space Base, Treasure Island, Rogers of the Ganges, and the Quacks of Quedlinburg. All those games were games that I played for the first time at Geekway to the West and continue to treasure to this day. I really do love those games. So let's jump into the list here. These were all games that I was eager to play in some form, and this is roughly the ranking of my enjoyment of these games and the things that I enjoyed about them. At number 8 is Origins First Builders. This is a dice worker placement game, and I'll hold up some art now that I have it. So it's a dice worker placement game where you are placing dice of different colors. You know your dice are yours because they are in, I don't know if you can see here. Yeah, right here. There's this little plastic holder that you keep dice in to show your player color. The dice can be of a variety of colors. And you're placing dice on a board to activate different actions. You're also building your own little tableau here. And one of my favorite mechanisms of the game is these actions up here, these main dice placement actions where you place a die here. You can place any die here as long as the number is equal to or greater than the number on this dial. And you gain one of the 2 benefits shown here. You can kind of see it. This is one benefit. This is a second benefit here. You'll gain one of those 2 benefits. If the die is a color matching this dial, then you also gain this benefit right here. There's a tile of that color. You gain that benefit. And if your die is a 6, then you gain, and if you gain 2 benefits, you can gain both of these benefits. And if it's the 6 of this matching color, then you can gain all 3 benefits. So I liked that system itself, that there's a lot of flexibility. There's no blocking, but it can feel really good when you place a die that matches the color or even a 6 on one of these action spots. I also thought it was a good reminder. I see so many games, including games of my own, where we use hexes to create a tableau or a map. But it's a great reminder here that octagons create a neat spatial element where if you place octagons together, they create a square between them, and a square happens to be a great place to place a die. In this game, the dice can matter for endgame scoring, and they kind of signal that you've completed a certain area. You can get more scoring if you complete a certain area. Yeah, so that is Origins First Builders. Next up at number 7 is, let me get my little cards here. Here we go. Number 7 is Picture Perfect. Picture Perfect is a really interesting game where you are behind a screen. You can kind of see the screen here. You are assembling a dinner party of all these different guests around a table, some really close to the table, some a little separated from the table, so that at the end of the game, you can take a photo of those guests. And you can see here, it's really well conceived so that the photo doesn't look like actual people there, but there's the floor here, there's the backdrop. It really looks like they're kind of at a table with all these 3D elements. And there's a lot going on in the game, but it's kind of a deduction puzzle game where you're trying to deduce where each of these guests want to be, because each of these guests has an envelope associated with them. And in that envelope are 3 random cards that say things like, this guest wants to be on this side of the table. and this guest wants to be next to this other guest, but they don't want to be next to this other guest, or they don't want their face to be seen. You can kind of see here, this lady is blocking the face of the person behind her because that person didn't want their face to be seen. So there are all these requirements for each person that are randomized and put in these envelopes. And you get to see some of the envelopes, but not all of them at different times in the game. And you can freely move around these people throughout the entire game until it comes to the end and you need to actually take a photo. I really like the deductive puzzle here. I think I wouldn't have minded a little more information because there were envelopes that I didn't see at all. And which envelopes you can see is fairly random. But there's some agency there, but there's a lot of randomness too. But I love the spatial puzzle itself of figuring out how to meet all these requirements of different people and where they want to sit or stand. And I also really liked one little clever touch here is that if you get points, you get scaled points basically based on how many of the different requirements each guest wanted. So I mentioned that, say this lady wanted to be on this side of the table and she wanted to be next to a certain guest, but not next to a certain guest. If I got all 3 of those right, I get 6 points. If I get only 2 of those right, I get 3 points. If I get 1 of those right, I get 1 point. And if I get none of them right, I lose 3 points. And that last one is particularly important because it means that at the end of the game, I'm not just going to randomly put out all the guests here, and not even just randomly, but there's some guests that I might not put at the table at all. Because I don't know anything about them, and I might end up getting none of their requirements right. I might luck into getting one of them right, but I might, if I don't luck into that, then I'll lose 3 points. So I thought that was kind of a clever touch in Picture Perfect. Next up, we have Key to the Kingdom. Key to the Kingdom is a childhood favorite game of mine that was recently restored by Restoration Games. And I found out as I was playing it that the designers are Ben Rossett and Matthew O'Malley, with whom I've worked on Between Two Castles and Between Two Cities. I was really curious how they would take a roll and write game and modernize it. And they did so in a really clever way, in that each player gets these 8 tiles that can modify the dice that you roll plus or minus a certain number. And when you use that tile to modify your dice roll, you flip over that tile and you can't use it again until you refresh it. So you are rolling dice, you are rolling and moving, but you have a lot of control. You have a lot of agency over what numbers you actually roll. And added to that in the game are a lot of interesting dice mini games. You're basically walking around this world, going to different mini games to collect parts of a key, to assemble a key, and each part of the board has a different mini game associated with it. For example, there was actually a very short path that I did not succeed on, where on the same turn, I needed to roll the dice 3 times, and each time I needed to end up with a result of 1. So a lot of luck there if you actually roll a 1, but that's why you want to go into that challenge with a lot of these modifiers so that you can modify that die down to a 1. That's just one of maybe a dozen examples of different mini games in this game. The thing that might be most memorable about it, though, is that the board opens up, and you can't really tell in these photos, but the board starts closed, and then 2 of these flaps, and once you place your worker, your pawn in a whirlpool, the entire board opens up, or half of the board opens up, and reveals this whole new world inside the board. It is a magical moment in the game to see the board open up like that, and I'd love to see that in other games. That's Key to the Kingdom at number 6. At number 5, we have Noctiluca. This is actually the one game that wasn't on my list, but I really enjoyed it. Someone brought it out, and we decided to play it. And it is an abstract game where you are drafting dice from a board and applying them to different cards that you have. And the puzzle element here is that you're going to choose a single row on the board. See these little hexes here? You'll choose a row of hexes, and you'll name a number. You'll say a number, and you'll gain all dice in that row, any color, that have that number. So you could say, okay, number 6, and you'll gain all dice in this row that have the number 6. And you will try to put those dice in the color matching squares on the 2 cards that you have available at that time, 2 gold cards. However, and this is my favorite thing about the game, and I love that puzzle element right there, but my favorite thing about the game is that if you can't place a die, you have to pass it to the next player, and that player might get to place the die. it's this really nice form of positive player interaction where you're never intentionally passing a die. But if you see a nice juicy row where you can name a number and get 6 dice out of it, but you can only place 4 or 5 of them, it's still probably worth it. And it feels good to get these free dice from other players as they pass them to you. And it really doesn't feel all that bad when you pass a free die to another player. So I love positive player interaction in games. I think that's really clever in Noctiluca. At number 5. We're into the top 4 here. At number 4, we have some upside down photos of The Hunger by Magic the Gathering designer Richard Garfield. There's a lot going on in The Hunger. It's kind of a Clank-like game where it's a deck building game where you're racing out of your the safety of your castle as a vampire. You're racing out into the night to eat people and recruit other vampires and get some missions and get some points and then get back to the castle in time for daybreak so that you don't burn up. There's a lot going on in this game, a lot that I really, really enjoyed. But I think my 2 favorite things are, one, that the game gives you the option of digesting cards in your deck. The people that you're eating are the cards in the deck. You get to, at certain points, you can digest them, which is essentially trashing a card, but still, you can still score that card at the end of the game, which I think is really clever. In fact, that's not even true. You score the card when you gain it. And so you have already scored the points for the card, but you are digesting it to trash it to get it out of your deck. I think that's a really clever and thematic mechanism in this game of culling out your deck as you load it up with these cards that aren't very good other than the moment when you gain them. The other thing I think is really clever is that every single person in the game has a unique name. And so it just added to the theme and the flavor of the game that we were calling these people by name as we were eating them and drinking their blood as kind of fun vampires in this game. But I really like the nomenclature. I really like that everyone had a name in the game. It really added to the fun of the experience. That's The Hunger from Richard Garfield. And I'll mention I did eat little Boo here. He just looked too adorable, and he gave me some points for buying other cards. So yeah, just that little Boo had a name here made it particularly memorable when we were playing The Hunger. That's The Hunger at number 4. At number 3, we have the longest and heaviest game that I played from Alexander Pfister, Boonlake. Thank you to Tim for bringing this game and teaching it to me. I don't normally play games that last longer than 2 hours. This game lasted almost 4 hours, and I really, really enjoyed nearly every minute of it. It was a lot of fun. I can't even begin to explain how much goes on in this game, but I guess the basic idea is that you get an abundance of these cards throughout the game, and you are using those cards to take actions for the most part. How do I even start by explaining what happens in this game? You're moving down a river to collect some points and collect different things, and you're kind of building out this world, building out this map as you go with tiles that you or other players might end up placing workers on and developing over time. But I guess a few of my favorite elements in the game that I should mention are it is a game with follow actions. So when I choose my action, and there's a neat little action selection mechanism in the game, but when I choose my action tile, I take that action, and then me and all other players get to take a bonus action associated with that action. And so even though it's a really long game, and there is a decent amount of time between turns sometimes, you are involved in every single turn because you have the potential to take that follow action. And I thought that really worked, especially in a longer game like this, having a follow action in it. It really reduced downtime quite a bit. I also like the switch system. I think they're called maybe upgrades in the game. I'm calling it switches because you have this little board right here, and there are all these bonuses that you can gain throughout the game where you place a little token on it, and when you're ready to activate it, you slide the tile down or slide the token down to cover up this benefit, and they all refresh at the end of the round. It's a neat little tactile system, but mostly I just like the system itself. This system of saying, okay, here are these things that you can do once per round, and here's your way of remembering what you can do and what options that you have in the future to add future upgrades. I thought that was really clever in Boonlake. That's Boonlake at number 3. We're now up to the top 2, and one of them is a Geekway treasure that I've been trying to play for years, and that is Ethnos. Ethnos is an older game from Paolo Mori, with whom I recently had the opportunity to work on Libertalia Winds of Galecrest on. And my respect for him as a designer has increased even higher because Ethnos is a game that I really, really enjoy. It is, what was it? It was described to me as Blood Rage meets Ticket to Ride, because it has a very simple action selection mechanism where on your turn you are either picking up a card from the card row or the deck itself, or you are playing a band of cards from your hand. And a band of cards is a set of cards that all share either the same name, like wizard in this case, or color. And the card that you put on top of that band is the leader, and that determines what color and what type of what faction that entire band is. So if I play a wizard card on top of, say, another wizard card, and then a gray orc card, that would be a 3-card band of gray wizards. And the gray determines where on the board you are placing a token for area control. And the wizard itself gives you an ability. Every type of card in the game gives you a unique ability. I really enjoy this style of asymmetry in games because in every game of Ethnos, you'll play with a different combination of factions. And those factions all have different abilities. Like the wizard says, draw X cards from the deck, X being the number of cards in this band. So when you play wizard cards, or a band of wizards, you will then draw that many cards from the deck right away, which feels really good. All the abilities feel unique and powerful and really good. I think this was the orc system down here. This was the giant tile that got passed around. So each of the factions has very different asymmetric abilities that are equally asymmetric for all players. All players have access to all of these cards. The asymmetry comes from the combination of the cards being randomized and brought together at the beginning of the game, which I thought was really clever. There's more that I really like about Ethnos. I'll talk about it more in detail in an upcoming video. But that's Ethnos at number 2. Then the number 1 game that I enjoyed the most at Geekway to the West was also the last game I played, and that was Wonderland's War. We played the deluxe version, so we have all the nice things, or the nicest versions of the tokens on this game. But the art is so beautiful and vibrant that I think even with cardboard tokens and standees, this game would be really, really nice and beautiful to play. Wonderland's War is a bag building, engine building game with a little bit of combat. So you're kind of fighting over these different theaters in the game over the course of 3 rounds. I won't even start to go into how the entire game works. There's a lot going on with the game, but a couple of my favorite things are, 1, the card draft. So you are gaining tokens for your bag, for your bag building element of the game, but you gain them from a tea party draft. So there's all these cards you put out around this table, this tea party table, and when you gain one of those cards, usually it says, okay, now on this card there's a printed icon that says this is the type of token that you will now gain and add it to your bag. And there are other things that they give you too. They can give you little upgrades for your character. You can see your character down here, so you can gain upgrades over here. You can end up putting forged tokens over here. There are various other icons that you can get from these cards. But it uses a rondel system where on this tea party, which I've highlighted so small here in this photo, but within this rondel, you will move your token as far as you want around the rondel to pick the card that you want, which is great. You have a complete freedom there. The one catch, though, is that whenever you completely round out the table and get to the end of the table, you need to add some, what are they called? I think they're called shard tokens or dark runes or something. There's a bad crystal that you need to gain that isn't like terrible, but it basically increases your chances of getting some madness tokens in your bag, which are not good. And so by rushing ahead on this rondel, you increase the chances that you're going to run out of options over a 4-card draft each round and have to go off the end of the table and take some of these crystals that you don't want. And also, but at the same time, when you do that, you get to refresh all the empty spots, all cards on empty spots, unoccupied spots around the tea party table. And so you actually give yourself some more options to consider by completing the table. I think that's one of like many nice points of tension in this game of, okay, do I go around this table really quickly, get a few cards that I want, and then refresh cards, but also get some crystals, or do I not do that? The other thing, there's a lot to talk about with this game, but the other thing that I want to mention real briefly is I love the combat track. Every time you do combat in one of these theaters, if you're involved in it, there's a big combat track at the top of the board that tracks your current strength. Kind of like in Dune Imperium, there's a track that temporarily tracks your combat strength. And along that track are little bonuses that kind of incentivize you to stop. There are other reasons the game incentivizes you to stop pulling from your bag as well. But there's little things like, in particular, there are forge icons. Forge icons mean if you stop here, if you end the battle here, win or lose, you get to upgrade your player mat from then on. So it's kind of enticing. The track is essentially enticing you to stop a little bit earlier than you really should to try to win the combat, and yet you're still also trying to win the combat. And I also like at the end of the track, if you somehow reach 25 points at the end of the combat track, which is all simultaneous, you're drawing from your bag simultaneously. If you reach the end of that track, you automatically win the combat. Otherwise, it's whoever's ahead when everyone has passed at the end of combat. But I really like that there is something to push for. If you really want to, you can go for the end of that combat track. I'll discuss more in my upcoming video, but I really had fun with Wonderland Tour, and I look forward to playing it again. It reminded me a lot of Quacks of Quedlinburg, but with some interaction on the board itself. Yeah, so those are the top, well, those are all the 8 games that I played at Geekway, ranked from the ones that I enjoyed the least favorite, or maybe, I don't even want to say that, maybe the games that I'm less likely to play again versus those that I'm more likely to play again. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these games if you've played them, or if you have attended a convention recently, or any sort of game night or event with other people, and you played a game that's new to you. Let me know what your favorite game was in the comments below. Thanks.